On the night of 18th of August, 1892, the new marble façade at Marble House, Newport, Rhode Island, stayed deliberately dark. Inside, in a second-floor bedroom overlooking Bellevue Avenue, a young Vanderbilt cousin stood before a gilt mirror, smoothing the fingers of her white kid gloves one by one. Below, servants waited for the signal that would ignite the $11 million cottage in light, a birthday gift from William K. Vanderbilt to his wife Alva. A society columnist from the New York World had already calculated the staggering cost of the house and its opening ball, hinting that such sums could fund a small town for years. In her notebook, the journalist jotted a quiet line about jewels enough for a treasury and gowns that will never see daylight twice. The girl adjusts her gloves again, rehearsing her entrance. From the street, Marble House explodes into light. From the mirror, she cannot quite look away. The evening will be counted as triumph, the bill as strategy. The cost will be paid in money first, and in something less visible later. In late January 1892, in a brownstone just off Fifth Avenue, New York, a secretary reads aloud the winter social calendar to Carolyn Schermerhorn Astor, whose January ball still defines the New York season. Names are weighed, crossed out, restored. Among them are the daughters of railroad and banking fortunes, Vanderbilts, Goulds, Whitneys, each expecting a New York, Newport, and London circuit that may cost the family the equivalent of millions of dollars today in gowns, carriages, hotel suites, tips, and entertainment. A detective later recalled estimating nearly $5 million in jewelry in Mrs. Astor's ballroom on a single night, stones pinned to necks, wrists, and bodices of women who had spent years being prepared to wear them without seeming to notice the weight. The camera dwells on gloved hands receiving invitations on heavy cardstock, on the rustle of silk at fittings, on ledgers where private clerks quietly add the week's accounts. From the beginning, a season is not just a series of parties. It is an investment strategy. The expectation is simple: spend boldly now, and the daughters will secure titles, alliances, and permanence. The girls learn early that every entrance has a price. The first bill arrives not at the dressmakers but in the posture expected at every doorway. By February 1890 in Farmington, Connecticut, the snow along Main Street mutes the sound of carriage wheels outside Miss Porter's school. Founded in 1843 by educator Sarah Porter for daughters of the country's elite. Inside, in a small upstairs parlor converted to a classroom, girls practice French dictation, piano scales, and letter writing, while a teacher corrects posture with a gentle tap on a shoulder. Early 20th century observers would list the staples of such schools: chapel, sports, French, literature, music, art, and careful distance from young men. Generations later, alumni lists would include Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy, Gloria Vanderbilt, and Barbara Hutton, confirming what society had long known. Farmington was less a school than a gate into the right drawing rooms. Here, the camera follows a girl as she pulls on her gloves before Sunday chapel, told that a hand must never appear bare in public. The gesture is repeated daily, before class, before a visit from a lady of the town, before a formal photograph. Refinement is taught as a series of micro-rituals: how to sit, how to hold a teacup, how to seem at ease while never forgetting to monitor oneself. The more natural it looks, the harder it has been rehearsed. In August 1893, the camera moved to Newport, Rhode Island, where Bellevue Avenue is lined with stone cottages like the Breakers and Marble House, built at costs of $7 to $11 million in 1890s currency, hundreds of millions today. On a bright morning, a young woman in a linen walking dress descends the vast marble staircase, gloves in hand, pausing as a maid smooths her skirt before she steps into view. Outdoors, Newport promises freedom: tennis on manicured lawns, sailing off Ochre Point, picnics on the cliffs. Indoors, the schedule is written in ink: breakfast in the family dining room at 9, riding at 10, French at 11, fittings in the afternoon, a formal dinner with guests at 8. Staff records show dozens of servants at each estate, Their labor makes it possible for girls to glide from room to room untouched by the mechanics of service. The summer season appears endless, but the girls know it is training. Every invitation answered promptly, every dance card filled, every afternoon call logged. Marble colonnades and ocean views suggest vast possibilities. The rules posted on the dressing table remind her that every path is marked. The ocean is just beyond the terrace, but she has been told precisely how far she may walk, calibrated narrative structure, and word count targets. I've completed the first act, chapters 1 to 3, with a total of 667 words plus the 150-word hook, 817 words so far. I need to continue with Act 2, chapters 4 to 8, which should be around 693, 750 words total, or about 139 words per chapter. Let me continue with the remaining chapters, maintaining the documentary tone and historical accuracy while staying within word count targets. On a rainy morning in April 1891, in a New York townhouse near Madison Avenue, a governess lays out the day's schedule for her charge, a 13-year-old heiress whose father's fortune lies in railroads. Lessons begin with German grammar, continue with piano etudes by Chopin. Then an hour of deportment in the drawing room, walking with a book balanced on the head, sitting and rising from low chairs without touching the arms, and practicing the precise angle for a curtsy. Etiquette manuals of the period insist that young ladies must be fluent in at least 2 languages, able to play or sing with taste, and write legible, gracious notes of thanks. The training is not merely ornamental. In a world where fathers negotiate railway mergers and mothers manage guest lists, a daughter's poise can seal an alliance as effectively as a contract. The camera lingers on ink-stained fingers pulling on spotless gloves before the girl sits down to write a dozen thank you notes at a small desk. Every note she writes today will be filed in someone else's memory for years. By December 1894, preparations for a debut season in New York began months before the first ball. Dressmakers like Charles Frederick Worth and American firms working in his style received telegrams with measurements and instructions. For Alva Vanderbilt's earlier 1883 ball, one customer alone employed 140 seamstresses, with most gowns costing between $500 and $700, far more than once-a-year purchases for young women now preparing a full season. Fittings occur in front parlors, where mothers examine bodices and neckline depths while daughters stand still, arms slightly outstretched, gloves rolled back to the wrist. A society reporter's notebook records breathless detail of silk, lace, and jewels because readers understand that each gown is a line item in a larger ledger of status. Ward McAllister famously insisted that a true fortune must exceed $1 million to sustain such display. The dress will be worn once. The impression must last for decades. In June 1902, a train climbed above Lake Geneva toward Lausanne, where, by the early 20th century, dozens of small finishing schools offered condensed courses in French, deportment, and European etiquette to American and European girls. Swiss finishing schools and Parisian pensionnats have become extensions of the Gilded Age educational circuit. Farmington or Foxcroft for adolescents, Switzerland or France for final polishing. In a lakeside salon, an instructor arranges flowers on a low table, lesson in both aesthetics and coded hospitality. Students, including daughters of American industrialists and South American magnates, take notes on seating precedents, visiting card etiquette, and the proper way to offer and receive gloves in public. Such schools were unaccredited and often family-run, offering a substitute for university education and promising to prepare girls for any society in the world. The camera watches a girl slide her gloves off exactly 3 inches before taking tea, as instructed. When the lessons end, the test begins. In drawing rooms an ocean away. On a clear night in February 1897, at the Bradley Martin Ball at New York's Waldorf Hotel, guests arrive in historical costume for what newspapers call the most extravagant ball of the age, costing an estimated $300,000 to $400,000, roughly $9 to $13 million today. A young heiress in a powdered wig stands under the chandeliers, dance card tied to her wrist by a satin ribbon. Her mother has coached her on whose names must appear there: a banking heir, a European attaché, a cousin of a peer. Each penciled initial is a future stake. Society columns the next day will list costumes and partners with forensic precision. The heiress herself will save the tiny card for decades. Such artifacts survive in archives as mute records of social calculus, of who had access to whom and how often. On the back of one preserved card, the pencil has bitten through the paper where one name was erased. In March 1893 in Farmington, teachers at Miss Porter's refined not just manners but resilience. Later accounts describe the school's code as one of charm, loyalty, and quiet toughness, an expectation that young women should buck up, endure strict rules, and never show strain. A modern journalist would compare a winter morning there to an Edith Wharton scene: white clapboard houses, icicles on porticos, girls hurrying between chapel and classes. Behind the serenity, letters and school bulletins reveal a culture that prides itself on testing girls' composure, preparing them for public lives in which personal unhappiness must be managed out of sight. A student, reprimanded for a minor rule violation, clasps her gloved hands tightly in her lap, the only visible sign of tension. Later, in a family letter, she will write about learning not to mind. Learning to appear unbreakable is itself a lesson with a cost. By spring 1894, discussions for transatlantic marriages often began in quiet New York drawing rooms, far from dance floors. Between 1870 and 1914, at least 454 American women married into European nobility, bringing dowries that total billions in today's dollars and shoring up fragile estates. Negotiations surrounding Consuelo Vanderbilt center on Charles Spencer Churchill, 9th Duke of Marlborough. Letters and memoirs record Consuelo's earlier affection for an American suitor and her resistance to the match. Family accounts describe Alva locking her in her room and threatening illness to obtain obedience. Financial advisors calculate what a duchy requires annually to survive and how a Vanderbilt dowry, $2.5 million in railroad stock, with a guaranteed six-figure income, can restore Blenheim Palace. On paper, the match balances perfectly. In the letters, the numbers never quite add up. On 6 November 1895, St. Thomas Church on Fifth Avenue became the stage for what the New York Times describes as a botanical fairyland. Masses of white flowers, carpets, and a packed crowd of onlookers straining for a glimpse of Consuelo Vanderbilt becoming Duchess of Marlborough. Vogue devotes pages to her trousseau, praising the ivory lace gown and the procession of attendants. Yet behind the veiled bride, memoirs later recall tears and reluctance. The ceremony records list the union as a triumph of wealth and title. Private accounts record it as a transaction. The wedding is the culmination of years of seasonal spending, each ball, house party, and call. Part of the architecture that leads here. In the official photograph, she stands composed. In her later memoir, this day is remembered as a surrender. In 1896, financial documents finalized the practical consequences. The Marlborough-Vanderbilt settlement channels $2.5 million in Beech Creek Railroad stock into a trust to serve the Duke and eventually his heirs, with an annual income of at least $100,000, many times the lifetime earnings of an ordinary worker. Legal and financial records from other unions, like Jenny Jerome's earlier marriage to Lord Randolph Churchill, backed by a dowry worth over $4.3 million today, reveal how the costs of a New York season, however lavish, are dwarfed by the sums transferred through marriage. The season's expenses are shown as rehearsal for far larger transfers. The money saved the houses. It did not always save the women inside them. By 1906, Consuelo Vanderbilt and the Duke of Marlborough had separated. Their marriage was annulled in 1921. Other dollar princesses experience similar disillusion. Many endure infidelities, loneliness, or eventual divorce. Meanwhile, the social world that trained them begins to shift. In Newport, Alva Belmont reopens Marble House and uses it not just for balls but for women's suffrage rallies, hosting operettas and teas where guests drink from china painted with "Votes for Women." The very arts of composure, correspondence, and hospitality once used to maintain the architecture of privilege, become tools to question it. The season taught them how power moved. Some learned, at last, how to redirect it. By the 1960s, many great Fifth Avenue houses had been demolished. Cornelius Vanderbilt II's New York mansion fell in 1926, replaced by commercial buildings. Newport's cottages, including Marble House and the Breakers, survive as museums. Their ballrooms open to tourists who pay a modest fee to walk through once exclusive spaces. In a quiet museum case, a pair of white kid gloves, similar to those worn at the 1883 ball, are displayed beside a dance card and a calling card tray. The labels offer dates, makers, and donors' names. They do not record the hours of practice that produced the gesture of slipping them on before every entrance. The gloves rest motionless behind glass, no longer instruments of social strategy, but artifacts of a world where grace was both art and architecture, both shelter and constraint. Once, a girl adjusted her gloves before descending these steps. Now, visitors pause before the case and wonder what it cost her to wear them so well.